Hello and welcome to FP Live. I'm Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy's Editor-in-Chief. So believe it or not, it has been just 2 weeks and change since Donald Trump took office. The news is coming thick and fast. The United States issued tariffs on China yesterday. China has already retaliated in kind. The same thing nearly happened with Mexico and Canada until those two countries reached last-minute quote unquote deals with the Trump administration, although it is unclear how significant the new proposals might be to actually tackle fentanyl flows, for example. Foreign aid has been frozen. Mass deportations have begun. Elon Musk and others are waging a war against the federal bureaucracy. And all of that is just in the last few days. I haven't even mentioned the threats against Greenland and Panama. If this is your first time on FP Live, welcome. These are long-form conversations with policymakers and experts. I often take subscriber questions. If you want to join in the fun, hit the subscribe button, use the code FP Live for a discount. We are also a podcast, which I urge you to follow. Now, we know that part of the Trump team's strategy is to flood the zone with news and initiatives. So how do we find the signal in the noise? And since we're FP, how do we do that in a truly global sense? Well, today I have three really smart guests on three different continents. Kishore Mahbubani is a top former Singaporean diplomat. He is now a distinguished fellow at the National University of Singapore's Asia Research Institute. Nathalie Tocci is the director of the Italian think tank Istituto Affari Internazionali. She's formerly served as a special advisor to EU High Representatives Federica Mogherini and Josep Borrell. And Ed Luce is the Financial Times' US national editor and a columnist there. Welcome, all of you. Thank you for making time. Ed, I'm going to start with you. You're in the thick of it in Washington, D.C., so let's try and find that signal in the noise. If you had to have a broad takeaway from Trump's first 2 weeks in office, what would it be?
It would be Elon Musk's role. It would be the takeover of the federal bureaucracy, his, I guess, in a sense, sort of hostile takeover of the Office of Personnel Management, of the federal payments system at Treasury, of the GSA, which runs federal real estate, and of course his shuttering or near shuttering of USAID. This is an extraordinary sort of challenge, unprecedented challenge to US regular order, to the rule of law, because he has no official position to do this and is, of course, unconfirmed by the US Senate. And a sort of galactic scale conflict of interest looming there, given Musk's multi-billion existing contracts with his companies and the federal government, and indeed his own sort of multifarious business interests, and where the federal government and regulators that he's planning to shut down or at least denude, where they clash with or potentially assist his bottom line, his business bottom line. And of course, that does impinge from the global perspective that you quite rightly mentioned on US-China relations. A third of Tesla's sales take place in China. And his sort of great regulatory hopes for autonomous cars actually lie with Chinese regulators. So that, to me, in a really sort of tight, hot competition of extraordinary number of things that are happening, that to me is the most important. Keep your eye on the money and the money man.
Very interesting. Nathalie, you're in Rome. How are his early moves being seen in Europe? It is striking to me that some of Trump's biggest attempted moves so far have been not on adversaries, but on allies. So you have the threat of tariffs, demands for high defense spending among NATO members, questioning Greenland's sovereignty. How worried is Europe?
I mean, it's very worried. And I think there are sort of four main points, some of which were predictable, some of which less so, and all of which being very, very concerning. So in a sense, we knew that Trump would come with a protectionist agenda. We knew that there would be talk about tariffs. Now, the move has not been made yet on Europe, but everyone anticipates that this indeed is going to be the case. And the big concern is whether Europe is actually going to stick together. Now, in principle, it should. In principle, it must, given that this is actually a competence at supranational level. But it's fairly clear that Trump is going to try divide and rule, and in particular, possibly offering sweet deals to his friends, Viktor Orban, Giorgia Meloni. And the question is whether these leaders are actually going to say, well, thanks, but no thanks, you've got to speak to Brussels, or whether they're actually going to fold, right? Given that they are Eurosceptic deep down, which kind of brings me to the second point, which is, in a sense, the sort of all-out assault on democracy. I mean, Ed was talking about some of the more domestic implications. There is obviously that international implication. This, I guess, is more on the Musk than on the Trump side. But in that duo, it's fairly clear that now, whereas domestically there's a MAGA agenda, at European level there is a mega agenda, and where in particular Musk has been very explicitly supporting the various AFDs and Fratelli d'Italias and reform parties and so on in Europe. And of course, the aim is that of, which relates to the first point, dividing Europe, because it's much easier, obviously, to deal with partners that are no longer partners, but they're rather some sort of mix of an adversary, as you were implying, and simply a vassal state, right? If those vassal states are divided amongst them. Which kind of brings me to the third point, which is, Trump 2, in a sense, as opposed to Trump 1, having a far more explicitly imperial nature to it. And this is where the threats on Greenland come in. And as we have seen, it is more than, whereas I would say in the first few days, there was a sense of, Trump should be taken seriously, but not literally. As time has gone by, there is this kind of, growing fear and feeling that perhaps actually he should be taken literally as well. And so this really speaks of a sort of Trump 2, sorry, maybe there will be a Trump 3 at some point, administration, which is not only nationalist protectionist and, sort of authoritarian, but possibly imperial as well.
Wow. Kishore, you are in Singapore. I know you were also in India earlier today. How are you seeing the early days of the Trump administration?
Well, I can tell you that most Asians are shocked by the complete chaos in Washington, D.C. And I guess, to Ed's point about trying to dismantle the government, Asians find that very strange because Asians like order and predictability and good governance. And here is Trump tearing it apart, echoing the warning of Tom Friedman once made that if you want a country with the least amount of governance, go to Somalia. So we will sort of wonder whether Trump is creating a Somalia in the United States. But at the same time, I also warn my Asian friends that whatever you do, don't underestimate the United States, because the United States is a very unusual society. In most societies, chaos sort of brings it down. In the case of the United States, for whatever reasons, for complex historical reasons, political chaos actually strengthens the social and political fabric of the United States and makes it in some ways, over the long run, a strong society. But nonetheless, I can tell you that in Asia, as you know, the most important player is clearly China. And China is watching Trump more closely than any other country is. And so far, I must say, Trump is delivering at least two goodies to China. Number one, he's clearly playing a short-term game, not a long-term game. And in the case of China, China understands better than most countries in the world that a new world is emerging. And I describe the new world as a 3M world: multi-civilizational, multipolar, multilateral, to deal with global challenges. The Chinese are preparing for a world of 2050 rather than the world of 2025. They're, in a sense, running a marathon, not a sprint, Trump is running the sprint, they're running a marathon. They say the sprinter will go by me. In the long run, the marathoner will win. So in that sense, if he carries on at this rate, then the Chinese will say, okay, time will be on our side. And at the same time, of course, he's alienating so many countries, especially friends, so quickly. Frankly, the Chinese may say, why don't we have 8 years of Trump? Because after 8 years of Trump, you wonder what the world will look like in terms of its approaches towards the United States. But the final thought I'll mention is, of course, the Chinese are also prepared for a big blow from Trump. At some point, they know it's going to come. They got to be ready for it. They're holding their firepower. It's going to come, and then they'll retaliate.